In an investigation that was recently done, a college student from Oxford came forward and said, "A quarter of my friends have been using these so-called smart drugs or nootropics whenever the exam period rolled around. And after a long time of abuse, they were left addicted and had to be expelled." So, what are these smart drugs? What are they used for? What are some popular examples of them? And why are they so controversial? Today, Tiffany and I will be presenting on this topic. An important thing to know about these drugs is that they're used for purposes other than therapy. Let me give you an example of our favorite drug, caffeine. If I have a paper due tomorrow at 8 a.m. and it's already midnight, what do? Well, I prepare myself a huge cup of coffee and hope for the best. I'm hoping that I get creative enough to make an intelligent argument, and I'm hoping that I also have access to all of my memory. I'm hoping that I'm focused on my task, and I'm hoping I'm actually motivated enough to complete my work. So all of these aspects I'm hoping to enhance. They can help us understand this term that's called cosmetic neurology, in which people take drugs to help enhance our performances rather than use them for therapy. Now that we know what some smart drugs are used for, what are some popular smart drugs? Well, one of them is modafinil or Provigil. It's a drug that's classified as a eugeric, that is, its chemical structure allows it to function as a wakefulness-promoting agent. We don't really understand the full mechanism of how it works, but we think that it works as a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, that is, it inhibits the reuptake of extracellular dopamine left behind in the synaptic cleft and increases the levels of dopamine. This indirectly also increases the levels of histamine and orexin in the hypothalamus, which leaves us in a state of heightened arousal. How can we harness this effect? Well, for therapeutic purposes, it can be used to treat narcolepsy, a sleeping disorder in which a person may fall asleep during unpredictable times of the day after experiencing heightened emotions, or it can also be used by soldiers in the military to stay awake for a long period of time or combat fatigue. It can also be used by college students to enhance some of the cognitive functions such as attention, learning, and some executive functions. Another common example of a smart drug would be Adderall. It's a CNS stimulant and it's a mixture of two amphetamine salts. Because its chemical structure is so similar to some catecholamines such as dopamine and norepinephrine, it can function as a catecholamine agonist. That is, it can bind directly to the catecholamine receptor and increase the levels of dopamine and epinephrine in the central nervous system. In net, this leaves us in a state of intense arousal and euphoria.
Now that we know how Adderall works, we can look at how it is used as a stimulant. First of all, it can be used therapeutically to treat those with ADHD. It can help them focus better and be distracted less easily, and this is because of those increased levels of dopamine. Those increased levels of dopamine can also be used by people like college students to help them focus longer, stay more awake and more alert, and this can help them study, and for this reason it's often called the off-label study drug. A third example of smart drugs are nootropic stacks, which are different combinations of stimulants and supplements that are used to enhance our cognitive functions in some way. Now it's important to note that these are coined as dietary supplements, which means they are not regulated by the FDA. And that's important because that means testing doesn't have to go into them to see if they're effective or safe. And basically, these companies that are marketing nootropic stacks, they don't have to be very specific about what's going into them. So people like Nutrabox and Bulletproof, they're able to market these different drugs that are supposed to help things like our memory or our focus and even our brain composition. But they don't have to be specific about how they're doing these things or whether it's safe in the way that they are doing them. Even more alarming is the increasing popularity of making nootropic stacks yourself. If you go to Reddit, you can find many threads about people discussing the different combinations that can go into nootropic stacks, and whether or not they're effective. But despite all these different, maybe alarming facts about nootropic stacks, they're still increasing in popularity because of their use in places like the Silicon Valley, where there's high levels of prosperity, and nootropic stacks get associated with this, so more people want to take them. Now that we know about some popular smart drugs, we can look at the controversy behind using them. First of all, the legality. Obviously, using prescriptive drugs for non-prescriptive uses is illegal, but when we look at how smart drugs are used and why they're used, we can consider whether or not maybe they should be legalized. We also need to consider the safety of using smart drugs. We don't know whether or not using prescriptive drugs for non-prescriptive uses or using nootropic stacks is going to be safe because we don't have enough research behind it to see what the correct dosages would be, if it's even effective, and how we can avoid being addicted to them. And finally, we need to consider whether or not cognition-enhancing drugs are fair to be taken. Some people may argue that it is fair because people that may not have been as cognitively blessed as others can get themselves up to the level as everyone else. However, other people may say that it's not fair because the people with the resources to get these drugs will just be given another level up in life. When we look at everything that we've learned, we can return to that example we saw at the beginning of the student at Cambridge and his different friends who had been using those smart drugs, and we can ask ourselves whether or not this is right, and whether or not smart drugs should be continuing to play a role in our lives, and especially our lives as college students, as more and more people are using these drugs to get through college. Thank you.
Thank you.